Hey Joe, how are you? I'm doing.
Welcome to the afternoon constitutional reboot. Like all the cool shows, get a reboot, and you say, "Is that what they look like now?" So I appreciate you receiving us and sharing us and doing it in a video space because people apparently trust this. We got a lot to get into today. I want to share some fun video. Kamala Harris, we talked about her being in Richmond on yesterday afternoon. She apparently stopped in to support small business by going to a used record store. But we want to jump right in from the get go because we've got some very breaking stuff going on in the world of technology, especially in artificial intelligence, but also in regulatory, the old school stuff. The stuff where politicians say they know best how to manage everything. And joining us is James Czernawski, who is the tech guru for Americans for Prosperity. James, how are you doing this afternoon?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Not at all. Thanks for jumping in on this because there's so much going on. But the legislators trying to show how adept they are at this, while one group is telling us be afraid of technology and everything, the other half is out there trying to come up with ways to fund new technology, AI, so that they can use it for surveillance. But tell us about this bill that's supposed to, quote, protect our kids online, and why is it getting so many people up in arms, including groups like yourself and the ACLU?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the Arnett Act, which is a bill that is run by Senator Lindsey Graham and Senator Richard Blumenthal out of Connecticut, basically it would seek to amend Section 230 when it comes to companies dealing with child sexual abuse material on their platforms. And, it sounds nice in theory. It's a noble endeavor. I think everybody agrees that we want to protect kids online.
Hmm.
But the question then becomes at what cost? And with this bill, what it's ultimately doing is it's discouraging these tech companies from using end-to-end encryption services, and that would go and undermine the privacy of lots of Americans in the process, because it would basically grant a backdoor access to law enforcement to look at the messages, or empower client-side scanning from these technology companies. And that's not really, I think, somewhere where we want to be. I don't even think that's where this Congress is in general, especially when you're
Hmm.
looking at the House that has an interest in wanting to actually rein in some of the intelligence community and their abuses
Right.
of power in this space over the last several years. So I think that really, when it's all said and done, while it's a noble idea, it's a wrong proposal to go and meet the moment. So I think that that's why you've had well over 130 different groups go and oppose this particular piece of legislation, including the tech companies too, of course, but notably over 130 different, civil society groups and public interest groups and organizations like ours have gone and come out in opposition to this.
Well, James, isn't this overly complicating something that should be a simple enough procedure? I mean, if something is illegal, it's illegal, and exploitation of children, last time I checked, is illegal. So,
Yeah.
why do they have problems coming up with ways to legislate this?
Well, the thing is that it's already illegal, right? To your
Yeah.
point, CCM is already a crime. So it's a matter of actually having, law enforcement support, have the necessary support that they need to go and, prosecute the people. It's not the platforms that are knowingly going and hosting this content. You know what I mean? It's not like they're seeking it out. It gets posted on there and they do what they can to take it down. But
Well, yeah, and to your point though, even if they are, you
yeah.
go after them then when that
Yeah.
happens.
Oh, 100%. And Section 230, which is the law in question, does not apply for when you're talking about a criminal statute.
Hmm.
That's one of the things that's very clear in the law. So I think that, again, it just misses the moment in that sense. And that's why you're seeing so many people be opposed to it, because we want to go and tackle it, but this is a situation where there's a lot of it out there and law enforcement's behind on tackling a lot of it. So we need to beef up our enforcement capabilities there. And there are other more narrow proposals that try to capture some of that I wish that Congress would actually focus some more time and attention on, because if they did that, I think we can go and combat CSAM without threatening the speech of people online and undermining their privacy interests as well.
Well, and I think you just said the magic formula right there because they want, and they already have in a lot of cases, bureaus involved with these agencies. Elon Musk was eloquent in his discussions of what Twitter already had been involved with regarding the FBI. And every time I asked the chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee, who happens to also be my senator, Mark Warner, about that, he goes on about how he doesn't like Elon Musk, but he never addresses the actual point, which is the FBI is apparently doing to Twitter feeds the same thing the Chinese Communist Party is doing to your TikTok feeds. So at some point, do we stop kidding ourselves and just try to be informed consumers about this technology and understand that by downloading the app, you've signed away your Third Amendment protections about government officers surveilling you in your house?
Yeah, so I think that, even if you're in an online setting, your Fourth Amendment rights still apply. This is why when we're looking at whether it's encryption or we're looking at like FISA reform, that's a big issue in Congress. This is why we harp on the need to have a warrant requirement, because it
Hmm.
does not matter just because it's an online thing, unless it's like in a very public fashion, you still are entitled to constitutional due process, and we have to respect that no matter what. But with the Internet Act, it's one of those situations where, again, you want to go and solve this issue, and really the best way that you tackle it is by helping law enforcement. I think that it's okay for law enforcement to have communications with these companies when it comes to dealing with something like CSAM, terrorist content, even like things where there's an actual nexus for potential harm. Not so much the Twitter files kind of stuff that you're referencing there, where it's like, oh, there's a Fauci parody count, or somebody who's talking about COVID and they're thinking that they're labeling it as misinformation, violating the potential platform rules in and of itself. So those
Well,
are,
that happened to this show. This
yeah.
show has been on YouTube for 2 weeks, and we've already had one episode taken down, and I'm already into my strikes because we actually talked about treating sick people with readily available medicine to make them well. So, James, so talk about the issue that I think is always skirting this is that it's politicians just trying to play free airtime games. So they pick on an issue that they think they heard Sean Hannity talk about, or they heard at an Americans for Prosperity event somebody say Section 230, and they're like, oh, okay, I get some free PR if I go out and say I'm against it. Is that really what's at this? And through that will come these unintended consequences?
Yeah, I think that there's obviously a very well known, reward for politicians if they're going to go and bash the big technology companies one way or another. And obviously, ever since Donald Trump was elected back when, he certainly kind of brought this otherwise obscure law into the face of the public eye and conversation. So lots of people have heard of it. Not a lot of people understand what it does or what it actually does not do, more importantly.
Hmm.
And I think that, it creates bad incentives for lawmakers to put out proposals where, again, it's like, you can agree CCM's bad, but is 230 the actual solution here? Trying to reform it in that kind of a way. The answer more often than not is no, and more often than not too with these proposals, it doesn't pass the sniff test of whether or not it can withstand First Amendment scrutiny. And I know that you were mentioning TikTok a little bit before, and your Senator Mark Warner, who's also my senator, I live in Virginia as well.
Oh, I
You
saw that 20-mile stare in your eye. So.
yeah. Mark Warner, he certainly has his own proposal there on the TikTok question called the Restrict Act, and we're certainly not favorable towards that either, because that would go and expand the power that is within the Commerce Department in quite an
Mhm.
extraordinary way. It would go well beyond whatever TikTok was, being targeted for in this particular instance. So you've always got to be mindful of that. There's very bad incentives, and
Well,
I wish that lawmakers would focus on these
well,
other more easy things, right?
Yeah, actually, you mentioned the Restrict Act, and I was on the press conference when Mark Warner announced that, and I jumped right on it. I said, "Excuse me, Commerce Department, and they're going to have this kind of ability to go in and shuffle around and look in these things." And then you see the story just the other day about all the weapons that apparently the IRS has been hiring. These are all executive level offices that respond really to the president more than anything else. They deal with Congress for funding, and I worry that we still are working towards this, for the lack of a better phrase, elected monarch who's just got his police forces for whatever he wants them to do, and they give them the permission to go into these places like the Commerce Department and just start rifling through your stuff because it's almost like we flipped the idea of innocent until proven guilty.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. That's why we're always alarmed when we see these kinds of proposals. It misses the, it misses the mark by a long shot. And when you're talking about Restrict Act, again, I think that's another one of these proposals that just misreads Congress right now, where again, you have a lot of people in Congress that want to go and actually strip away powers from the intelligence community and these unaccountable bureaucrats and these executive agencies. So I think that, again, you really want to go and just focus on what is in the realm of the possible rather than some of these proposals that I think, again, while well-intentioned, don't actually solve the issue here. The last time that we reformed Section 230 was back in Sesta Fosta in 2017, and the GAO report on that thing had actually demonstrated that the law itself was barely used. 3 times, I believe, it's been invoked in the 3 years since its enactment. And then on top of that, too, it's been harder to go and deal with sex trafficking because it's been shifted into a deeper part of the web, a dark web, if you will, and it's shifted outside the United States border. So we're actually not even tackling that sex trafficking issue as good as we could be. And then on top of that, too, you're exposing women to violence here at home that were otherwise using the internet to go and, vet clients before meeting up with them.
Charlie
and
Mingus,
now, because they can't really do
one
that,
of the
they're getting
greatest
exposed to
jazz
more violence because they're, being put into a, unfortunate relationship with a pimp or something. And that's not great either.
Well, so, I go with this simple. I always, James, you know this about me. I look at what we originally had. How is the internet? And you mentioned the Fourth Amendment, and people say, "Oh, the Fourth Amendment doesn't take into account technology." Sure, it does, because it says very plainly your documents, your things. It took into account that the things that they had in 1789 might be added to by the time perpetuity rolls around. The Third Amendment: no government soldiers can be stationed in your house. I think a officer of the intelligence community looking at my internet searching is ostensibly stationed in my house through this technology. I know I'm a little radical when I talk to my friends about that, but what do you think about going back to the simplicity and applying it?
I think that, this is the beauty of the Fourth Amendment in many ways, is that it doesn't require some kind of technology, caveat in there. I think Samuel Alito, when he was talking about Carpenter back in a few years back now,
Charlie
he kind
Mingus,
of highlighted it well. Where
really
it's like
one of
courts
the
aren't
greatest
necessarily
jazz
technology, but it doesn't
performers
change the premise of the
One of my
question
favorite
here.
albums.
States and the government are ultimately responsible here to go and set the guardrails. So I think that only reinforces the point for government to actually engage in an exercise of passing something that is restraining in nature. And thankfully, we've seen some states take that up. Utah, Montana, a lot of states have been very cognizant about trying to, peel back from the state surveillance aspect. I don't think that it's about taking away a tool from law enforcement. I think it's about trying to go and balance that public safety interest or that national security interest, if we're talking about these intelligence communities, against American civil liberties. Because again, I get it. These things are important conversations to have, but when the nexus of the search comes within the borders of the United States, our Constitution must be respected. That's that's part of the institutions that give people faith in everything. And if you're violating it so blatantly, or we empower them to violate it with something like the Earn It Act, then that presents a whole different problem. People don't trust one another anymore. They don't trust the situation that they're in. I don't think you want to be in a situation where you feel like you have Big Brother watching you. And that's why I think that we need to focus on more pragmatic solutions that are tackling the actual issue at hand here, rather than some of these extreme proposals like the Earn It Act, which would also go and undermine a really promising technology that a lot of Americans like and use, like encryption technology.
Well, and speak again, and I think, and James Czernawski is on with us from Americans for Prosperity on this. He's their tech expert on that, because we've seen this before, and the government kind of uses this as the reason to let the camel's nose under the tent. Is, oh, this is new, and the American people don't know what to do with it, and the implication always bothers me that we're not smart enough to figure that out. But get a warrant, come search the things. I mean, we went through this with cellular phone technology, and it took almost a decade before somebody said, well, hold it. Maybe we can get a warrant for the cell phone because they weren't able to wiretap these wise guys in New York because they all got Blackberries, and all of a sudden they could only wiretap an address, and they couldn't get the guy while he was walking down the street saying, "Hey, we're going to call in to hit," and so they had to figure out a way around it, and it took them forever to figure that out. But yet the old rules still did apply, James.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that that's a thing that we have to be cognizant of is sometimes the government has a workaround. So even if we get the warrant requirement on some of this stuff, it still ends up being a problem in different ways. So like one of the big issues is that the FBI will go and purchase ad data on Americans. Like that
Hmm.
was something that the director at the FBI had admitted that they used for a pilot program. He claims that they don't do it anymore.
Of
So we'll
course.
take that at face value with a grain of salt. And at the end of the day, that I view that as a violation of the Fourth Amendment because even not that I'm into the, you own your data, like in the sense of, some people thinking of it of like, oh, data dividends or,
Right.
data is the new oil, if you will. I view it as your property insofar as that it is inextricably linked to you. And in that context of a criminal investigation, you are still entitled. That's a castle doctrine. Like you deserve to have that due process afforded to you. Even it shouldn't separate just because we're talking about a house in one instance
Right.
under traditional circumstances versus, your Facebook profile. It still is your personable belonging and you're entitled to due process.
Well, and you mentioned due process. I was just a story, oh gosh, 2 or 3 days ago. A reporter said that his wife, who is a professor, went to travel and found out that she had been flagged as a terrorist. And she said, "Well, what the heck is that?" And it turns out she was in Washington, D.C. on January 6th, 2001. Her cell phone got pulled up in that trolling expedition of just give me ping everybody's cell phone that was here, and she was on a list. And there is no standard for due process on how do I get my good name back in those cases. This is
Yeah,
scary.
yeah, it is. And I mean, when you think about it on the state level, this is where it's justifiable. Like from a commercial perspective, I'm very hands off. I want to let companies deploy technologies as much as humanly possible for innovation. That's great for
Yeah.
us on average. But when it's the government, the difference is when they get it wrong, usually the costs are very steep and very real. So, like, I think about this example of a guy named Jorge Molina, who was out in Arizona and law enforcement there did a geofence warrant and basically captured all the phone data from a particularized location from Google in this instance, right? And it turns out that somebody else was logged in on a separate device to his Google account, so it showed him in a location that he wasn't. But he was arrested. He was named a prime suspect. He had to drop out of college, and he wasn't even the guy who was responsible for the
Right.
murder in question. And that is where I think that, again, I want law enforcement to be able to have tools. I want them to be able to perform their public safety function, but that doesn't mean that they have a blank check to do it by whatever means they see fit. We have to go and have some kind of guardrails to
Mhm.
ensure that they are respecting people's due process rights because again, they're an institution. We want people to trust their local law enforcement. We want to be able to trust our intelligence community, and when they're blatantly disregarding our rights, that's why we have to go and have these guardrails in place.
Well, I feel like, James, that what we're seeing is semi-intentional to get us to agree to some of these things, like these acts, the Restrict Act and the Enable Act and the Disable Act and all the different acronyms that they come up with, because, oh, it's too scary and it's too confusing and you all can't understand it and you're just gonna mess up your own lives if you don't have us and from the government looking out for you. And I feel like that's number one, it's offensive. But number two, I think they're taking advantage of the fact that technology is making breakthroughs like crazy, like AI, and
Yeah.
and they're going to take the advantage of turning this into a totalitarian state.
Yeah, I think that we've got to be very careful in the AI conversation. This administration, thankfully, is not really great on any kind of technology whatsoever.
Well, because
Uh,
he was born
they
before electricity, so
Yeah, that is certainly something that is impossible to ignore. And in many ways, our president has certainly seen a lot of the world's history. I think what happens here is that whether it's crypto or AI, he's been very bad on those fronts. But that being said, the government is always looking for a new tool to use, and if they can go and use that to their ability, they'll do whatever is
Mhm.
necessary. And if it happens to violate your due process rights, they don't care. They'll take it to court. They're fine. Sovereign immunity is a thing. Like
Yep. No,
they're
I
not really
understand.
worried about this. So I think that again, it is very problematic, and I do genuinely want people to be focused. I actually agree with your sentiment when it comes to I really despise when people make the assumption that you're not smart enough to understand what's going on
Mhm.
here. I actually genuinely think that American people, when sat down and talked to about what's going on, can make reasonable determinations for what they think is appropriate or inappropriate when it comes to government use of these technologies. So, from my perspective, I'm always for making the government have to go and explain itself and justify what it's trying to do. We expect and deserve nothing less than that because
Mm.
we are the ones that are paying into this system, and I'm sure as heck not comfortable paying in for them to go and surveil me when I've done nothing wrong.
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, I don't know how to cast a hammer, but I know how to use one. With a bandage on my finger, notwithstanding. They play this game, saying, "Well, do you know how to code that website to make it do that?" It's not. I did at the very early days of Java, not Java. Yesterday was May the 4th. In the very early days of Java, I did teach myself how to make a very rudimentary website for my business. And if you just stop and you take a moment, you can figure out some of this stuff. But I want to spend the last couple of moments talking about some of the government's use of AI, and not just in that they have any grasp of what artificial intelligence can do. But already, James, they're pitching the idea that AI is creating false news, fake news. They're bots that are convincing you to do things you wouldn't do otherwise. Whether or not there's that much artificial intelligence being employed out there is a question for you. But also, are they just using that as the boogeyman of the month, having run out of white supremacists, I guess?
Yeah, I think that when it comes to AI, it's very easy to go and jump on the train of doom and gloom. Again, it's very scary when you think of the Terminator situation, but it's important to realize that no AI person actually can give you a hard consensus timeline for when that Terminator kind of AI is going to come around. The most aggressive people might say the next 10 years, and I'll believe that when we listen to other people on other topics making similar claims. But you have other people that say 30 years, 50 years, 100 years, never going to happen. So I don't think that that's a reason to stop the development here. It's funny that you mentioned the misinformation and fake news. The RNC, when Biden announced his reelection campaign, put out an ad going and outlining what a world in Joe Biden's next term would look like, and they did the ad purely with generative AI. And you had all these people complaining and making those kinds of commentary, and I'm like, yeah, because I think you're projecting the problems of political advertising onto AI. Last I
Right.
checked, political ads were not necessarily known for being wholesome and truthful prior to the use of AI here.
Sh
So,
sh
it's
shocked
something we
shocked
can't.
I am to hear such a
I
thing.
know, right? Political ads being wholesome and stuff without AI? No, never. No, I think it's one of those things that we have to always keep in mind. So it's a very powerful tool, but it's very early on in the process. So we're just really scratching the surface for in terms of what it can do and what the potential is there. And that has me excited. It's not going to go and take everybody's jobs. It's not going to go and empower this crazy Terminator situation. It's just a new technology that's been there at least for the last 10 plus years that we've been using, just not in this outward facing ways. So really, I think it's just all overblown. And it's not some people are just overreacting way too much to this.
Well, and from a marketplace standpoint, in Americans for Prosperity, James Czernawski is out on with us, their tech guru. From a free market standpoint, isn't it conceivable? Okay, so you have some bad guy that can program AI. The good guys can program AI too. I guess once we figure out who they are, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I guess in to put it to a similar conversation, right? You could say the same thing about the crypto sector, where it's like, hey, Sam Bankman-Fried was a very bad guy,
Yeah.
but crypto itself is not bad. It was just that you had a bunch of bad actors that,
Hmm.
because people were either choosing to remain ignorant or they weren't taking it seriously, were able to leverage what was a good technology for nefarious purposes. That doesn't make crypto bad. And the same thing can be said about AI. I'm sure that people will go and use it for bad reasons, but that's not something to go and say, hey, stop this altogether. It's about going and getting the good minds together and figuring out how can we go and set some reasonable rules of the road to mitigate the bad actors and empower all the good actors to give all the good positive, externalities that AI can give us. And
Well,
that's really where the conversation needs to be. And with this administration, it just really hasn't been happening to date.
well, and that's one of the things. And you mentioned crypto, and there's the Fed, I guess, is discussing a
Yeah.
CBDC.
Yeah.
I find it interesting that CBD keeps popping up somewhere. It's not 420 yet, is it? But that they want to develop a digital American currency. And one of the things I noticed about the Chinese digital currency is that it expires. They've programmed it to not work after 6 months, so they discourage saving, which is a uniquely communist thing to want to do anyway.
Yeah.
So talk about how do we protect cryptocurrency? I still point to the fact that I can't go into Kroger and buy anything yet. Yet, I mean, it's getting closer where I could go into Kroger and buy groceries with it. But to make sure that the coin of the realm is still a coin that I can do as I see fit with, and it's my property, not
Yeah.
some weird digital asset that they seem to want to pretend it is. Because I still think our take home pay, 16th Amendment notwithstanding, is our property, James.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that when it comes to what do we do here, thankfully, I think congressional leaders are mostly closer to you and I on this than perhaps the alternative of the Chinese digital yuan. But they're using it. The
Hmm.
Chinese are using that as a way to try to supplant the American, reserve status that it has for the dollar. And that's part of the fumbling when you have the Saudis deciding that they're okay with potentially going and transacting some of their oil in digital yuan instead of the dollar. So that is something that is a threat in its own right. But when it comes to a CBDC, it's about making sure that we actually keep it away from the consumer facing level as much as humanly possible, and most certainly probably just not having it at all. Because the problem that arises with the CBDC, which really should alarm people, is that if the Federal Reserve is going to go and have that, and the blockchain technology basically tracks the transactions that you're engaging in, that means that the government has basically a free glance at your purchasing history in
Hmm.
ways that's not currently
Right.
possible. And it's one thing if you're going and you're having that done in a private setting. It's something else if you're asking the government to go and fill that role. So I think that it's very alarming. I think that it's about setting some guardrails in terms of how, once again, the government has to be willing to restrain itself here. I know, crazy notion.
So
But this is where Patrick McHenry and Tom Emmer, many of the good Republicans in the House financial services sector, have been really, really good about this. And if we want to go and encourage the development and a continued innovation in crypto, it's about actually, doing some things at the SEC, because right now Gary Gensler has been very critical of it, treating everything like a security, even though there are many cryptocurrencies that don't necessarily do that. Now, some people might treat them like securities, but that doesn't make them securities.
right.
I think that that's something that makes it very hard to distinguish. And I think that we need to go and set some rules of the road to give that industry the long needed clarity that is needing. So that way we can actually foster innovation here at home. Wyoming's been very aggressive about trying to be crypto friendly. And that's why you've seen so many unicorns pop up in that state, in that space. But we've got to do more because the federal government is the one that can kind of unleash the entire country's access, if you will, for
Hmm.
this industry and sector. So I think that we really have to focus there in terms of what can we do to give the clarity that's necessary. How do we give them a safe space, if you will, to go and grow properly? So Chair McHenry of the Financial Services Committee has a bill that would set up a regulatory sandbox on the federal level that would try to tackle some of that. And I think that we have to go and encourage more flexible kind of approaches like that in order to make sure that we have a good, thriving crypto community here in the United States, as opposed to any of our economic adversaries or other places of the world.
Well, James, I appreciate it. I don't think there's anything left in the world of technology. Did we miss anything? I can't imagine.
I mean, there's always something going on in tech, but that would take up the whole nother show at this rate. But thank
Uh,
you so much for having me on. It's always a pleasure talking about these issues.
AFP.org. You have a wonderful weekend.
You too.
We're going to switch gears here a little bit, and we're going to begin a change of gears because the to say constitutional, it means a lot of things to a lot of people. So the afternoon constitutional has always been, you know, the traditional the traditional source for anything constitutional, and the meaning of the word the constitutional has always meant several things, including like a walk by the lake or something that reconstitutes your mind. And so I want to take a little bit of time here and talk about something beautiful that you can do in our flagship area, which is Charlottesville, Virginia. It's the Charlottesville Ballet is coming up, and they're going to be coming into town, and they've got a new show coming up here, and I don't know what happened. You're hearing me, but I am frozen in time. So let me see if I can't fix the camera here and somehow figure out why I got frozen in time here. In the meantime, our friends from the Charlottesville Ballet are here, and I appreciate them taking some time out to get with us here. I've got a little scene while I figure out what's going on with my camera. This is a little bit of the Charlottesville Ballet and doing. So that's coming up. I believe that's some of the rehearsal scenes, and Emily Hartka is on with us from the Charlottesville Ballet. Emily, thank you for taking some time. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Joe. Thanks for having us on today.
Not at all. So Cinderella is the show that's coming up. Tell us about, we all, I think, we all know the story of Cinderella. Tell us about the ballet version of Cinderella.
Yes. Well, we are doing the production. It premiered in 2019. And Joe, this is a big statewide collaboration with the Southwest Virginia Ballet. The choreographer is Pedro Zalai. He's a Hungarian Venezuelan born choreographer and resides in Roanoke. So we've actually got our professional company of dancers with dancers from all corners of the US and around the world performing alongside 50 students from across the state of Virginia. So both in Charlottesville and Roanoke and in between. So it's a huge undertaking and collaboration. And one of the beauties is that we all know that story of Cinderella. The ballet is full length. It's a little over 2 hours long, and it's one of the most beautiful scores. It's Sergei Prokofiev. And
Hmm.
you've probably heard the da da da. And some of
Hmm.
the Disney movie actually took some of that score as well. So
Oh.
you will know some of the tunes.
You
And the
won't you
show is
won't get
just
in
magic.
trouble. I mean, I know Disney's been really prickly about some of that stuff. We got a note about playing a little short clip from Star Wars the other day. So I got to be careful with crossing Disney these days. But
Right,
Emily,
right.
so talk about the kids. Obviously, the professionals, we were just watching the video, are incredible. So talk about the kids and what their opportunity is, and how they come to be in this position to perform with these world-class ballerinas, and be part of the show that they've probably seen a dozen times on Disney Plus or Grandpa's VCR.
Yes, the old VHSs in our
Yeah.
days, right? Well, we, as many of our fans in Charlottesville know, we have the company, but we have a very large school. So Charlottesville Ballet Academy now has over 700 students
Wow.
across Central Virginia. So this is a hand-picked cast, just 50 kids. And these students audition, so they, have that experience of working
Hmm.
hard. Not everyone gets a part. Those are really part of our goal, is not just to make future professional dancers, but to give the children in our community that idea of discipline and structure and striving and working towards, a professional production, which is a
Hmm.
big deal to be on stage with these amazing ballet dancers. So I think
Absolutely.
that's been a really wonderful part of seeing the kids on stage. And then for our audience, when many of us come to a show, when we have our kids with us and they see those students, another 8-year-old on stage doing this magical stuff with like glitter falling from the sky. It's so inspiring for our young audience members to see that, to see their hard work and to see the
Hmm.
beauty and the magic on stage. So I think we always try to incorporate as many children as we can into these professional productions to keep that high caliber, but also giving experiences both to the kids on stage and to the audience.
So, when the kids audition, and obviously I've had my little ones. My daughter was in ballet when she was very little, and then at some point she decided photography was more her thing. But you do learn poise and control, but also you break that wall that I think a lot of kids have with, I don't know if I can do this or not. So I think that all the performing arts, and people say, well, Joe, this is a show about news, and what do you, I think the performing arts, as I said to my son when he announced to me that he wanted to go into theater, I said, well, storytelling is the most important part of any society's life. So doing it in a way that just is so compelling and so multi-dimensional, like a ballet, is very important. What do you hear from the parents of these kids, Emily?
I think for the parents, we hear a lot about just like hard work, right?
Hmm.
So in this day and age, a lot of people, a lot of kids it's hard to stick with something, especially with the last, couple of years. These kids are so resilient and learning that professional caliber production, seeing professional dancers who, their toes are sometimes bleeding. They're doing a lot of hard work,
Sure.
seeing that and mirroring that and having that example and mentorship is really powerful. So, they get to hear our Cinderella speaking Japanese and like having some of these backstage experiences where you get to see hard work. And I
Hmm.
think that's so good for the kids. A lot of them have overcome some stage fright, which is really wonderful to see,
Sure.
building
Absolutely.
confidence. And then I think it is mutual too with the professional company dancers to see, talk to the parents. They take pictures with the kids. We have little ones that were 5, the last time we did the show in 2019. And now they're like, assistants to the fairy godmother in their beautiful tutus. So seeing that trajectory too of, this production is 2019, now it's 2023, and these young kids are in the show again, but now with this, royal role. So I think
Hmm.
it's really cool to see that
I
growth.
know that COVID made a big challenge for the Charlottesville Ballet and its program with the kids and everything. How has it been? Not to bring up, the flu that shall be unnamed, but let's talk about coming back from it and getting kids involved, Emily.
Yeah. So for the company, Joe, we were on hiatus for 2 years. So our professional company dancers all moved back to all corners of the world. It was definitely, I mean, as most arts organizations, we are in the business of big gatherings in theaters
Hmm.
and educating kids and breathing hard in small classrooms. So that was a real big challenge for us. We had amazing patrons and donors who've gotten us through the last 2 years. And we brought back the professional company just in 2022. So this
Hmm.
really is the reemerging of the professional company for the Charlottesville Ballet. And this is our 15th anniversary season, which is
Amen.
crazy how fast we've grown.
Yes.
Um, and for the children, I think too, so many of them were crushed with those, they were supposed to perform and then they didn't have the opportunity. So I think being able to have the shows, there's still always that anxiety of like, well, some kid have a snotty nose, and then we'll have to figure out what is it
Hey,
COVID,
can
is it
she
not?
say
They're all.
snotty? What are the new internet laws about saying things like snotty? I no, no,
Can I
no,
not say that?
no, I'm
Retake
kidding.
me.
I'm kidding. No, so bad sales pitch 101. I should have led with how can people get tickets, when are the shows, all that stuff that is going to be important to filling all the seats to see this program, Emily. So how do they do that?
So they can go, we're actually in Lynchburg this weekend at the Academy of Cinema Arts, where we're the resident dance company. And then we'll be at the Paramount Theater on Saturday, May 13th. We've got shows at 11 and 3:30, matinee performances. Tickets are at charlottesvilleballet.org/Cinderella. And they start in price at around $20. And there's also, Joe, the best part is the VIP event after the 11 a.m.
Mhm.
There's ready for this, bibbity bobbity ball. It is my favorite
That's a
word to
good.
say.
I like that. That's a.
Yeah.
No, was glass slippers, or is that OSHA say no to that?
There's some bedazzles. We do bedazzles, no glass
Okay.
on stage. But the kids, young kids, like 3 to 10, 3 to 8, will get to come on stage, have pictures with the cast,
Mhm.
and they'll actually get to dance along to the Prokofiev score and learn some dance moves themselves on the stage with
So
the cast. So
that's a great way to get them involved. You give them a little taste of it, and then next thing you know, they're in there. And how about parents that might want to sign up the kids for the ballet program, Emily?
yes, so we've got our summer classes and camps are online now. We've got lots of camps for mornings, evenings, busy parent schedules, trying to get, summer 9 to 2, 9 to
Mhm.
noon. There's lots of options. That's also on our website. It's cb.academy, or you can also go to the charlottesvilleballet.org/academy. You can see our classes and camps. Sign up now.
And now I'm going to play the other clip you sent us. Now, the first one was obviously the show. This is a clip of some rehearsal going on. Perfect, for the role, and it's a great opportunity for them as well. Emily, thank you so much for taking a little time out and talking with us about the ballet, and hopefully lots of people can get it. It's charlottesvilleballet.org, correct?
Yep, that's right.
Or can they just go to Paramount Theater website for it too?
Paramount has it as well. Yep,
Mm.
whichever is best. Oh, and I should give you guys this discount code.
Oh,
There's a
well,
discount
now come
code.
on. I thought I was the one burying the lead. My gosh.
There's a discount code if you say social number two, tutu, like a ballerina tutu. So social 22 will get you 10% off any tickets in the house at the Paramount.
Well, thank you so much for that as well. I'm trying to use my smartphone here to order the tickets. But Emily Hartka, thank you so much for everything you do at the Charlottesville Ballet, and we'll talk to you again very soon.
Thanks to you guys and the whole Monticello Media team. We love having you guys as a media sponsor. So thanks for your support.
That is terrific. charlottesvilleballet.org. Thank you. And we'll finish up. And again, thank you for everything you do to let us do what we do here. We have, we try to have a little fun here every now and then. This is the this is the vice president in Richmond.
Really one of the greatest jazz performers ever. One of my favorite albums of all time. Roy Ayers, Everybody Loves Sunshine. You know this one? It's so good. It's a classic. And then Porgy and Bess.
So
right.
I'm trying
She's got some
to
good
figure out,
selections
and of course, Charlie Mingus has a wonderful song. It's called BS. We won't play it because, again, rights, royalties, don't want YouTube. YouTube will find enough to throw us off for that. But go look, listen. It's a terrific song. But I just thought it was interesting that she loves Charlie Mingus, and one of his hit records is called BS. And hey, make of the Porgy and Bess soundtrack what you will. There's well known from the time when she was in the presidential race, when she was one of the nominees trying to get the nomination, about her grandfather's plantation in the Bahamas. So just thought that was an interesting little Porgy singing a couple of glasses of Cab Franc and put the Porgy and Bess on. I'm just saying. I want you to have a great weekend. I appreciate you guys being on the receiving end of everything that we do here. And thank you so much for allowing us to do the things that we do. And until such times as we do it again on Monday, I think that will be the time. I imagine I'm the one who would decide such things. So long, and thanks for all the fish.